Okay, good morning. Am I audible? Okay, so let's start. So yesterday we had discussed about types and their importance. So today we will start with the typical basic data types that are supported by programming languages. So first, the Boolean type. Okay, so it is typically implemented as a single byte where one is represented as true and zero is represented as false. Okay, so that's a typical implementation. And why do you think we use a an entire byte to represent a Boolean data type?
Sir, because usually RAM provides memory access to at least one byte, not to a single bit.
Okay, right. So how does it help us? We can actually mask out certain bits and then use only one bit to refer to a particular Boolean variable. That would be more memory efficient, right? But still, typically, we use a single byte. One of the reasons is what Pulkit just now said, because the memory is byte addressable, so we get an entire byte, and in order to extract one bit or use one bit of the byte, we will need to do certain more operations, that is masking of other bits by ANDing them with a proper value, etc., which is more which requires more instruction, so more amount of time to take a look at the value of the boolean. In order to be conservative about time, we use extra space, and therefore we use the entire byte to represent one boolean. Okay, knowing that it is not memory efficient, but still, it's since it is time efficient, and nowadays memory has really gone up big over time. So we it's not surprising that we have machines which now take even 64 gig of RAM storage. Just to point you out to history, when I and my batchmates started programming at VNIT in 1988. Those days we had personal computers which used to cost roughly around 1.5 lakh, and the amount of RAM which they had was 640 kilobytes. Okay, and the amount of hard disk was roughly about 20 megabytes. So consider how much memory was a constraint those days, but still most of the programs which you do, as assignments, we were also able to do using that much amount of memory. The programming doesn't really cost us a lot of memory. What costs us memory are essentially data items, that is, images and videos and so on. So now, over time, since memory has become cheap, lot of advances in computer architecture, we have lots of memory. So this is the general implement or general principle, that use memory freely so that you can save on time. Right. So this is the typical implementation. In some programming languages, if we use lots of booleans in the program, then the implementations make a choice of packing many booleans into arrays and use only one bit for representation of every boolean. So this implementation is better as far as the memory usage is considered. But then, if we want to access a particular boolean variable, then we will need to do that masking business which I discussed just now. Okay. And I had discussed this earlier. So C was C. Richie decided not to have the Boolean variable at all, So, it's as per the language design. So C took an integer and it said that anything that is zero in the integer is false and everything else is true. Okay, so any specific language which use this packing implementation, I'm really not aware of any particular language, but there might be some languages which actually can use this packed kind of an implementation. I know Pascal uses a packed implementation for implementing arrays, but we will discuss that in detail later. Right. So in C, as we were discussing, we take an integer, and if zero is taken as false, and everything else is taken as true. And the newer version of C, that is C99, introduced a new Boolean type. Okay, but it is effectively an integer, and the compiler is permitted to store in a single bit. So it gives flexibility to the compiler to use one bit of that integer out there. So it's an integer, remember. So now if we have a 32-bit machine, then we are actually using 4 bytes to represent one Boolean. And if it's a 64-bit machine, we are using 8 bytes actually to represent a Boolean. Right. Then the second basic data type is the character type. So earlier characters were implemented as 1 byte quantities, and their coding was done using this ASCII format, which had specific values for 256 characters. Okay, and since those days there were only or only so many characters were represented, 1 byte quantities was sufficient to represent any character. But nowadays, when we want to represent more characters, that is for internationalization, that is characters which come from scripts of different languages, then 1 byte is not sufficient, and therefore nowadays we have this Unicode character set, which is a 2 byte entity. So now we can represent 2 power 16 characters, which for the time being is sufficient for us to represent most or all the characters which we think of in various language scripts. Okay. And the first 128 characters of Unicode are identical to the ASCII encoding, and others we use for other languages. C and C++ both provide regular and wide characters. Here something which I mentioned in C, char is essentially treated as an integer. So we could assign any value to the character variable, and if the value matches one of the values which is provided in the ASCII encoding or the Unicode encoding, that is what gets printed out when we print out a character using this %C symbol. Right. So in C++, the idea is still the same, but we could also have wide characters. Means I could have a different encoding, for example, ASCII or Unicode, and the actual implementation is dependent on the compiler itself. While Fortran 2003 it supports 4-byte Unicode characters, so recent version of Fortran. So therefore, we have even a larger set for representation of characters. Okay, now let's come to these numeric types. So we have the main numeric type that is supported is the integer type, and also the floating point numbers. So in C and Fortran, we have different lengths of integers and real numbers. So we have an int, the basic type, and a shorter version of that. So we could prefix this int with short. So therefore, it's the short int. Or we could have a longer version of that, which is long int. And typically, the compilers will take this int as the native implementation in provided by the hardware. So hardware supports an integer type in some way. So where if for a 32-bit machine, we have an integer of size 32-bit. Okay, and so the basic int type is directly translated into the hardware type because the implementation would be efficient. Okay, and we will talk about the implementation of integers in the hardware and also these real numbers in detail in a short while. So most languages do not have this kind of different lengths supported for integers and real numbers. So for C also supports two different types of real numbers. So we have the float, which actually is a single precision real number, and we also have double, which is a double precision real number. Okay, so when we say double precision, then it means that the range is wider. So we have more number of bits for the mantissa as well as for the exponent. The range is wider, and also the precision of representing a real number is also wider. However, most programming languages just have one data type, integer or real, and they leave the choice of implementation, that is the amount of precision that is to be used, they leave it to the compiler or the interpreter. And typically, the compiler or the interpreter will use the native hardware supported integer or real number such that the operations are faster. And because of these differences in the precision across language implementations, we have programs which are not portable across machines. So, for example, if there are, let's say we use the C programming language itself, and in one machine an integer takes up 4 bytes, it's a 32-bit machine, and in another machine which is 64-bit, an integer takes 8 bytes. So there is longer precision. And if we have written our program taking into consideration that the implementation uses a particular size for representing an integer, then a program which works on machine 1 or which works on machine 2, which has 64-bit inherent assumption made by the programmer, may not work on machine 1 because that uses 32-bit. Okay, so we should not really depend on the size of an variable. Okay, we could use the size of operator, which is the C built-in operator, which tells us what is the size of a particular data type supported on that on that implementation. That is the decision made by the compiler for a particular machine, and with that, that tells us about the size of a particular variable of a data type. But the size also determines the range. So if we have a 32-bit integer, then we know if we use the 2's complement form, then the range of that integer is minus 2 power 31 to plus 2 power 31 minus 1. And then if we store in that particular variable a value which is beyond this range, then we will have problems about the interpretation of that particular value, and that leads to lack of portability. Right. Java and C Sharp, they provide different lengths of numeric types, okay, with a specified precision for each of those types, where the precision is specified, which means that uh, an integer in Java, irrespective of the machine on which it is implemented, will always consider that a particular representation, let's say that is the 64-bit representation. So all integers of 64-bit, all integer variables in Java, let's say, have this 64-bit implementation, irrespective of the hardware support. That is, the hardware require might take an integer as a 32-bit entity, and in that case, then the compiler or the implementation would have to take an effort to convert a 64-bit integer using these 32-bit quantities. Okay, and so suppose we want to implement a 64-bit integer and the hardware support is just 32-bit, then how would we implement a higher precision integer where the hardware support is not there? Any ideas?
We split the integers. We split the 64 bits into two parts and add the parts separately and add the carryovers later on.
Yeah, correct. So how do we, in order to implement this, we would need some kind of a support, or the compiler itself must write piece of code which does this transformation. Correct, and which means that now the operations on integers are costlier because there are multiple things that are done for every operation. So had we used the native integer support, then we will have one single instruction to say add two integers. But now, as Pulkit just now described, in order to represent an integer, we need two native integers, combined together, and then if we add two such integers, there would be carry, and we will need to add the carry and so on and so. Okay, which this particular implementation can be done either by the compiler by writing a piece of code, or it can be left to the language implementation, that is a library provider who provides support for these pieces of code where we support larger integers. But then this kind of software implementation will of course require more time than the integer that is used, whatever is provided by the native machine. Okay, and these languages C, C++, and C Sharp, they support both signed and unsigned integers. So unsigned integers would mean negative numbers cannot be represented. So for a 32-bit machine, the range is different. For an unsigned integer, the range becomes 0 to 2 power 32 minus 1. While for a signed integer, we have a range in one bit has to be reserved for sign, so the range becomes okay. So let's discuss how the integer representation itself is made in the hardware. So unsigned integers are represented with n-bit binary, and therefore, if we have n bits, then the range is 2 power n. So it is 0 to 2 power n minus 1. So essentially, 2 power n numbers, positive numbers, including 0, can be represented as an unsigned integer. To represent signed integers, that is, those which can take both positive and negative numbers, the sign is an extra information that needs to be into account, and typically the most significant bit of the as the sign of birth, and most often the format that is used by the hardware is this 2's complement representation of it. So what is the 2's complement representation? So here for a sign bit, we have the most significant bit, which if that value is 1, then it indicates that we are using a negative number. So now the range is shortened. So it is minus 2 power n minus 1 to plus 2 power n minus 1 minus 1. So if you see carefully here, if we have an integer of say 8 bits, so if we just consider n of size 8, then the range becomes 128 plus 127. So similar higher values of it we can find out. So how do we represent a negative number? So there are two ways, and both of them are equivalent, and I'm sure you must have seen earlier also. Then one way is to take the positive number and complement it. So and add 1, and the representation becomes the same negative number for the positive number that we started off with. So that is one way with which these negative numbers are represented in this 2's complement form. All the positive integers in any form have the same representation. Okay, it's just the negative numbers which have a different significant bit. Copy bits up to and including the first one, and then invert all the remaining bits to come out with the representation of a number. Okay, so for example, 14 is represented in this integer. If we consider that integer takes a byte, that is 8 bits, then 14 is represented as 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0. That is plus 14. And minus 14, if we use any of these algorithms, the representation of minus 41 use algorithm 1. So I first of all complement the binary number equivalent of 14. So that becomes 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1. And then 1, 1, 1, 1, 0. 1, 0 is minus 1. Right. And this is something which I want you to understand carefully. Okay, so what to scanf percentage d and of some variable x, and while we input that x through the keyboard, we will input, let's say the number input is minus 14. Well, this minus 14 is read by the system as a sequence of characters, that is minus 1, 4. And in order to store this value in the memory location pointed to by this variable x, this character stream of minus 1, 4 now needs to be converted into a bit pattern that represents the minus 14 number, which is this bit pattern that we discussed just now. So that conversion actually needs to be done by the language implementation. So essentially the compiler or the interpreter. And this bit pattern now gets stored into the memory location whose address is this referred to by this variable x. Okay, and then when we use that variable x, how the contents of that particular memory location are fetched, and the interpretation of that now becomes entirely our responsibility. So somewhere we have to remember that this x is an integer. So therefore, if integers have to be interpreted in the 2's complement form, so this value of x represents has to be converted into its decimal representation, and the character stream needs to be emitted out if I say printf percentage dx. So in that printf function, what will be done is it will fetch the contents of the memory location pointed to by x. It will have this bit pattern now have the printf function needs to reconvert it back into the decimal form, because all of us are comfortable with the decimal form. And in order to print out that value, the decimal form equivalent now needs to be printed out on the screen or on the terminal as a sequence of characters. So we get this -14 printed on the screen, which reflects the value of that number, which is stored in the 2's complement form. Is this clear? Just want to emphasize this fact that memory just stores some bit patterns. Pattern might be a floating point number, it might be a pointer, it might be an address to a function, or whatever. So it's up to us programmers or the programming language implementations which need to understand what is this pattern and according. So that's essentially what is what I meant uh, by using this. Right. Now let's take this case that suppose now we want to represent a or add that a longer version of an integer support. So we will take the 2's complement number and we will add. So for example, our integer 8 bits, just for the sake of explanation here. And suppose now I want to have a 16-bit representation for an integer. So what do we need to do is something that we will be discussing out here. that is 1. Rest all the 7 bits are 0. So that is this 8 presentation minus 128. The key is still the same here, which was 1 in the 8 bits, all the rest of the 8 bits, and this particular for 32-bit representation. And this is called as sign extension. So I just want to make sure that was this term introduced earlier? Okay, so it was not introduced. If this is for the first time, if there are any questions, please ask. And I'm sure this will be introduced in more detail when computer arithmetic would be introduced in the computer organization, that is the CO course, where these details about these representations would probably be explained. What we are trying to do here, I'm just introducing a gist of all that, so that when we talk about assignment of numbers of different precision, what really happens inside is something that I want everybody to understand. Right. So this is called as sign extension, and you can confirm it yourself that this sign extension is the correct way with which we can represent both positive and negative numbers, preserving the value which we wanted to have, and the value is the decimal value which we started off. Right. So that is about integers and integer representations. If there are any questions, please ask now. Otherwise, we'll move to the floating point representation. I'll just take a pause for a minute to know if there are any questions here so far. Right. So since there are no questions, let's proceed further. Okay. Second thing that is another term that I wish to introduce is this representation or byte ordering, which is called as the Little Endian format or the Big Endian format. Have these terms been introduced earlier? Little Endian encoding versus Big Endian encoding? Okay, so right. So let me then cover it up. So let's say now we have an integer represented as 32-bit number. So how do we number the bits? That is, which is this least significant bit and which is this most significant bit? And then how is this integer actually stored on the machine? So if we assume that the entire memory is byte addressable, then in the Little Endian form, the numbering of the bits starts from right to left. So beginning with 0 and going all the way to the most significant bit, and this is called as Little Endian byte order. And all these Intel processors and the Digital Equipment Corporation's DEC processor uses this Little Endian byte ordering, right? Versus the Big Endian byte ordering says that we number the bits from left to right, beginning with 0 out there, and that kind of representation is used by these machines, that is Sun Sparc and the Macintosh machines used by Apple computers. And this is this big Indian byte ordering. So if we talk of a 32-bit integer representation, then in the little endian form, the least significant 8 bits would be stored in the first byte, that is byte with the lower address. Then the second most or the second least significant bit would be stored in the next memory location, and so on and so forth. So we have these bytes represented uh, in that particular stored in that particular order in memory. While if we talk of the big Indian byte ordering, then first we will have the most significant byte stored in the memory which has a lower address, followed by the rest of the bytes one after another. Okay, and now let's say if we have these two representations, this also leads to programs which may not work. So, for example, let me take an example. Let's say we write a program in the C programming language, and we compile it, and on an Intel processor, and because Intel uses this little endian byte ordering, all our integers would be stored in the way I discussed just now. And if I take the same program, and I take the executable and try to run it on a different machine. Okay, the compiler out there must the executable form definitely cannot be run on any other machine there, because the instruction set itself is different. But let's say I take the same source level C program, and I want to run it on another machine, such as the Mac machine, which uses this big endian byte order. The compiler must know that this particular hardware uses this kind of ordering, and therefore, when it prepares the bit pattern for an integer which we input, it uses this appropriate style of byte ordering, such that the hardware can pick it up correctly. So the compiler needs to know this byte ordering form on a particular processor, which is either this little endian or the big endian byte ordering. Okay, so and therefore, if these, in order to have portability, that is, we want all source programs to be working on different machines. Java used this style that every integer representation uses a particular form of encoding, and that is this big endian form which the designers of Java decided to represent. And the byte codes, which is the intermediate representation that is used by the Java compiler, something which we discussed a little while earlier. So the byte codes are emitted out in such a way that all integers are represented using this big endian tag. And once that intermediate representation is finalized, the interpreter, which is this Java virtual machine, can then assume that every integer is represented in the big endian type and can work with that representation further on. So even though the hardware itself on which it is running might use some other encoding. So Java said that everything is to be represented in big endian type byte ordering. And if the actual hardware expects integers to be of little endian type, let's say we are running this program on an Intel processor, then this conversion from this big endian type to the little endian type will be the responsibility of the interpreter. Okay, such that so those peculiarities of those details about the hardware have to be known in order for a program to work on a particular machine. So, is this clear? Right. So I suppose it is clear. So let's proceed ahead. Now let's talk of this floating point standard. Okay, why is Nitin Kumar has asked a question? Why is big Indian used while little Indian is straightforward? While okay, you may have that opinion, but somebody else like me might have an opinion which says that big Indian is more natural than the little Indian. It's purely some aesthetic sense, and that's why these processors are designed differently. The entire world is not uniform that way, and we need to now hide out these differences at some level, maybe at the interpretation level or at the compilation. Okay, so there is no answer to this why big endian is used or why little endian is used, so on. So some ordering must be used. So some processors use one type and others another type. I'm sure the computer architecture or the hardware manufacturers will probably answer this question better. Roughly speaking, the circuitry of implementing an integer in either of these form will roughly be the same. So, or circuitry in the sense the complexity of the circuitry. The circuitry, of course, would be different because the which number to be picked up as the most significant byte or the least significant byte has to be implemented by the underlying hardware circuitry. So you would have know about these full adders, etc. So from which memory location the most significant byte needs to be picked up. It's dependent on the byte ordering. So the circuitry is different. But once that is done, the rest of the part is the same. So it's purely the decision of an architecture manufacturer. Right. Let's now come to this IEEE floating point standard, and this has kind of become the de facto standard of representation of any real number. So there are two forms. One is this short form, where we have a 32-bit format of representation of a real number. And this 32-bit form in this IEEE 754 standard is split into two parts or three parts roughly. So the most significant bit is the sign bit that tells us about the sign of this entire real number. And then there are 8 bits, okay, which represent the exponent. Okay, so 8-bit exponent would mean I can have 2 power 8 possibilities, and if I treat this exponent itself as a sign number, because I need to represent real numbers which have an exponent which is negative. So therefore, the range out there is minus 128 to plus 127. So essentially, we can represent, and this entire exponent is interpreted in 2's form, an exponent to the power of 2. So essentially, we have 2 power minus 128 until 2 power plus 127 as an exponent that can be supported for a floating point number of 32-bit. And rest 23 bits are used for storing the fractional part. Okay, so what is done is, let's say we want to represent some number, let's say like 123.65. Let's say I want to represent this number now in decimal, and I want to represent it in this IEEE 754 format. So what is done is, first of all, I will have to get the binary equivalent of this number. Okay, and the binary equivalent that I will get would be in such a way that the exponent is adjusted in such a way that the decimal point which we are having will always be pointing to the leftmost side. That is, I represent this just to speak of in decimal number. So if I have 128.43, so let's say I have this number 128.43. I will represent this number as 0.12843 multiplied by 10 raised to 2. Is it 10? It should be 10 raised to 2 or 10 raised to 3? Yeah, 10 raised to 2. No, sorry, 10 raised to 3, right. So it should be, so if I take the decimal thing, I have 128.43 represented as 0.12843 into 10 power 3. So if I now represent it using this floating point form, so 3 will be my exponent, and the sign bit is 0 because this is a positive number. And the fractional part, which is called as the mantissa or the significant, will now have these numbers 12843. Okay, now assuming that this is everything is represented in decimal, but however we binary. So first thing that I will have to do is get the binary bit string equivalent of this 128.43, and I'm sure you must be aware of how to. So for the real part, that is on the left hand side of the decimal, we know how to get a binary equivalent of that. How do you get a binary equivalent of the fractional part? That is something on the right hand side of the decimal. So how do we get a binary equivalent of that? So let's say I want to just have 0.43. How do I get a binary equivalent of 0.43? Yeah. Any ideas? Yeah, correct. So we keep on multiplying by 2. Yeah, correct. So we keep on multiplying by 2, and wherever we can we keep on multiplying by 2 and just consider the integer part. If the integer part is 1, we will write that bit as 1 out there. Otherwise, we will write that bit as 0. Correct. That's right. So we will need to implement this as so first get the binary representation of this number, let's say 128.43, and then we will adjust the exponent in such a way that the decimal point occurs at the leftmost bit. Okay, and the immediate bit after that leftmost bit must always be 1. Okay, so we as the exponent, and the exponent value would actually be stored into these 8-bit exponent that we have discussed. Fractional part. So the rest of the bit string is represented here. But since we have already adjusted the exponent in such a way that the digit immediately after the decimal point always is 1, then in order to increase the precision, the hardware manufacturers say, then why should we represent it at all in the representation? We can make an assumption that the first bit after the decimal point is always 1, and therefore hide that 1 as well in from the fractional part, that is from the mantissa or the significant. Okay, is this 7.5 in order to simplify the circuitry that is required for exponent computations? This exponent is added a bias. So that is, a bias would mean, so if I, since the number itself, so if I take these 8 bits, as we have discussed, the 8 bits have, we can represent minus 128 to um, 1 to 127. So that's the range with which I can represent exponents using 8 bits. So whatever is at the bias is 7. So that is, to that number I always add this value 127. Therefore, I change, just shift this range from minus 128 to 1 plus 127 minus 1 to plus 254, or actually, so I add 127 to 0 to 5. This bit, this represents a 0. Actually, what is being referred to is minus 128, because that's the bias which we have added. And if it is like the bit string refers to this integer plus 5, then we know that what is to be represented out here is minus 123. Okay, because we have added 128 as an exponent. So I need this. I have taken this slide from someplace, but I think there is an error here. So what we add out here is actually 128. That's the bias that we will add to the exponent value. Okay, so this is how this IEEE floating point standard for representing floating point numbers is used, and for this long form 64 bit principle say that we have more number of bits for exponent and more number of bits for fractional significant. So therefore, the range has of real numbers has increased, and also the precision of representing this. Okay, we are almost time here to say that we detail again in the computer architecture course. Why these decisions made, how the circuitry is there to add two floating numbers, etc. That would be discussed in detail. But just one thing I want you to understand, that treating two floating point numbers them is much more tougher than having operations on integers. So typically, a floating point addition would be roughly around 4 to 8 times slower than integer addition operation. And for this reason, if we have lot of floating point arithmetic being done in a program, so many of the processors also have what is called as a floating point coprocessor, so which is optimized to work only with floating point numbers, and circuitry is therefore optimized, so we can actually perform the floating point operations by sending out all floating point data to a floating point coprocessor, and the main processor works only with integers. Okay, so those architectural details should probably come up in the CO course. Okay, just something to take back, that floating point representation is non-trivial, and the circuitry is also pretty complicated. So, any questions? So, shall we end the lecture? Okay, fine.